Picture the photograph you have already seen 100 times. A single red rock, alone on a flat desert, burning orange at sunset. Everyone knows two things about it. It is billed as the world's largest monolith, and it is one rock, a single giant boulder dropped onto the sand. Both of those ideas are wrong, or at least far stranger than the postcard admits. The stone that rises 348 meters above the plain is only the tip of something much larger. Beneath it, beds of rock at least 2,400 meters thick are tilted almost onto their side, near vertical, at about 85 degrees. This rock has not been sitting on the desert, it has been standing on end. The name most people still reach for is Ayers Rock. A South Australian surveyor, William Goss, wrote it onto the map on the 19th of July 1873, naming the stone after Sir Henry Ayres, the Premier of South Australia at the time. Goss saw a mountain of bare rock standing over an empty plain and did what 19th century explorers did. He measured it, named it after a politician, and moved on. From that first European glance grew the story that has stuck ever since. The biggest single rock in the world. A lone monolith in an empty land. It is a tidy, dramatic image, and it makes a wonderful photograph. It is also, in almost every detail, a tourist's image rather than a geologist's. So start with what the rock is actually made of. Uluru is arkose, a coarse sandstone packed with grains of feldspar. When it is fresh, that rock is grey. You can still see the original grey in the shaded caves along its flanks. Its famous rusted red is only a weathered skin, the iron scattered through the sandstone slowly oxidising, literally rusting, wherever the surface meets the air. Geologists have a name for this particular body of stone, the Mutijulu arkose, and it is not a freak or a single mysterious lump. It is one layer among many that fill an enormous sunken region of Central Australia called the Amadeus Basin, a great sedimentary basin where sand and mud piled up over vast stretches of time. Around 550 to 530 million years ago, mountain ranges to the south were being worn down by rain and rivers. Their debris was carried out and dumped as an alluvial fan, a spreading apron of sand and grit laid down at the foot of the ranges. That sand, buried and cemented into solid rock, is Uluru. On the surface, it stands 348 metres high, 863 metres above sea level, and close to 9.5 kilometres to walk the whole way around.
Here is where the postcard quietly breaks. When that sand was first laid down, it settled in flat, level sheets, the way sand always does under water and wind. Today, those same sheets are not flat at all. They stand almost upright. The beds inside Uluru dip at around 85 degrees, tilted so close to vertical that it is easier to picture a book that was lying open on a table and has since been shoved onto its spine. And this is the part the sunset photograph can never show you. The rock you can see is only the exposed edge of those upended layers. The full thickness of the tilted strata is at least 2,400 metres, nearly 7 times the height of everything standing above the ground. The rest continues downward, kilometres into the earth. Parks Australia puts it plainly. Most of Uluru lies beneath the surface. The monolith in the picture is not a boulder resting on the desert.
It is the worn tip of a buried slab standing on its end, and the sand has quietly swallowed the rest of it. What you see above the plain is what geologists call an Inselberg, an island mountain, an isolated hump of hard rock left standing proud while the softer ground around it slowly wears away. The rock did not push up out of the desert wore down around it.
And it does not stand alone. 25 kilometres to the west sits a cluster of great domed rocks called Kata Tjuta, the place many still know as the Olgas. From a distance they look like a different world, dozens of rounded heads rather than one clean wall. But they were born in the very same event at the very same time, out of the wearing down of the very same ranges. The only real difference is the size of the grains. Where Uluru is fine, even sandstone, Kata Tjuta is conglomerate, sand mixed with rounded pebbles and boulders, the coarser rubble that dropped closer to the mountains before the finer sand could travel further out. Same story, 2 chapters. The cluster gathers into some 36 separate domes, and its tallest, Mount Olga, rises about 546 metres above the plain, noticeably higher than Uluru itself. 2 of the most famous rocks in Australia are not rivals, and they are not twins. They are 2 exposed corners of one buried sheet of stone. So what stood these layers on their end? Not one event, but 2, separated by well over 100 million years. First came the Petermann orogeny, an orogeny being simply an episode of mountain building, when the crust is squeezed until it buckles upward into ranges. That was the event around 550 to 530 million years ago that raised the very mountains whose sand became Uluru in the first place. Long after those mountains had worn down to nothing, a second squeeze arrived, the Alice Springs orogeny, roughly 400 to 300 million years ago. This later collision folded and levered the once flat beds, tilting them up toward the vertical position we see today. The rock carries a record of both, the mountains that made it and the mountains that later stood it upright. Which leaves the other famous claim, the biggest rock on Earth. It is not even the biggest rock in Australia. Far to the west, deep in the outback of Western Australia, stands Mount Augustus, known to its traditional owners as Burringurra. It rises about 860 metres above the surrounding plain, more than twice the height of Uluru. Its central ridge runs almost 8 kilometres, and it covers a noticeably larger footprint on the ground. By nearly any honest measure of size, Mount Augustus wins comfortably. But before we hand it the crown, the whole contest is built on soft ground. Mount Augustus is a folded stack of several different rock types, which is exactly why geologists say it is not really a single monolith at all, while Uluru, one uniform body of arkose, fits that word far better. And that is the twist inside the twist. The phrase, the world's largest monolith, was never handed down by science. It is a tourism slogan, worn smooth by repetition, attached to whichever rock a brochure happens to be selling.
But there is a deeper way in which this whole argument misses the point. For every European who measured this rock, named it, and ranked it against others, there were people who had known it far longer and understood it in an entirely different way. To the Anangu, the traditional owners of this land, Uluru was never a geological curiosity or a record waiting to be broken. It is a sacred place, woven into Jukurpa, the body of lore, knowledge and creation story that guides how people live here and has done for tens of thousands of years. Under that lore, climbing the rock was never something you simply did for the view. In 1985, on the 26th of October, the title to Uluru was handed back to the Anangu, who agreed to lease it back so the national park could be managed jointly. 34 years later, to the very day, on the 26th of October 2019, the climb was closed for good. The map itself slowly caught up. The dual name, Ayers Rock and Uluru together, was made official in 1993. And in 2002, the order was quietly reversed, so that Uluru at last came first. And the wider park carries a rare double honour. It is listed as World Heritage for its natural values, granted in 1987, and again for its cultural values in 1994. One of only a handful of places on Earth recognised for both at once. Step back, and a pattern shows through all of it. Nearly every label that outsiders reached for, largest, monolith, Ayers Rock, was a way of measuring the stone by the one thing they could actually see, the part that pokes above the sand. The Anangu measured it instead by what it means, and by the lore it holds, none of which appears anywhere in a photograph. The rock we argue about is the smallest, shallowest version of the thing that is really there. If the most famous rock on the planet is mostly hidden, tilted, buried, misnamed and misjudged for a century and a half, how much of the rest of the world are we also seeing only the tip of? The desert is full of stones that look like the whole story and turn out to be no more than the opening line. If you would like to know what else this continent has been quietly keeping underground, stay with us, because there is a great deal more down there than the surface will ever admit.